Hello, and thank you for joining me to learn more about the new content capture and process automation capabilities we're providing in Microsoft 365 as a part of the new Project Cortex product offering. My name is Sean Squires, and I'm a product manager on the Project Cortex Content Services team. I'm thrilled to be here today to share with you an overview of this new cool content services product. The team and I have been working very hard this past year to get it ready for release. And if you caught my session at Ignite last year, I think you'll see that we've come a long way since that pre-alpha preview. Did I say pre enough? The purpose of this session is to provide you with an understanding of why we're investing here, but more importantly, to preview the several new capabilities we're offering as a part of this new intelligent content services offering. Specifically, I'll show you how to build, train, and deploy the AI apps that are at the center of this initial set of features, and how they are used to automate the classification of your content and the extraction of information from them. This includes both document understanding and form processing models. I'll also touch on how this relates to the investments we've made in the managed metadata service, a foundational element of our evolving investment in this content platform. We refer to these new capabilities as intelligent content services, as it's really about extending our already robust and market-leading content management platform to extend the value of metadata and options to automate it even further. In this initial release, we do this by providing content understanding models and by extending and building upon our powerful managed metadata service. And yes, that includes content types. I know, I love them too. Let's go ahead and get started with a demo so you can see the power of a prime library where models have been applied to facilitate content retrieval, business process automation, and content governance scenarios. Let's go ahead and start by just uploading some documents, and then while those documents are processing, we can go ahead and look at some of the features that distinguish this new library. I want to go ahead and just grab these three service agreement contracts. And while those are uploading, let's go ahead and look at what's happening here. First, you'll see that we have a notification banner informing the library owner or content creator when they're uploading the files that we are analyzing these files, that there's something happening that's going to continue to process them. We also provide other visual cues in this library to indicate that it is a library that has been primed with one or more models. One of the things we do is we have this new information bubble next to the library title. And if I click on this, you'll see that there's more information informing the user that there are models being applied to this library that can be used to automatically apply content types, extract column data, and populate the fields automatically. You'll see here that I can also open up a panel and view what models are actually applied to this library. And you'll see that if I click on one of them, I can get more information about the model, what it's doing, when it was published, and even if there is a retention label applied. So as you can see, with the files uploaded, we create the content types and also the views for those content types. So I can switch to that view and actually see that content type and its full schema. And you'll notice that the files I just uploaded were actually processed. And once the right content type was applied to it, then the rest of the metadata information associated with that content type is going to be extracted and written out to the appropriate SharePoint columns. Once you have this information, you can do all sorts of things to not only aid in information retrieval, but even to ensure proper governance policies are being enforced, as well as to even drive downstream business processes. You'll see here that we've applied the retention label business. This is associated with this contract. So at the time that this file was classified, we applied the business retention label, and then any policy associated with that will be enforced. So for example, in addition to a retention time for when this file could be deleted, we can also even lock it. So if the file is deleted early, let's say that we go ahead and try and delete this file that has a business retention label on it, you will see that the user gets blocked because the retention labels policy is preventing it from being deleted. The other thing you can do is take this additional metadata and drive additional business processes using Power Automate Flow. So for example, you will see here that I have this fee amount of $100,000. I can build an additional flow that will say, hey, if the contract is over a certain amount, go ahead and flag this for review or notify my manager for audit before it gets approved. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is you'll see here that we have built a new Power Automate trigger, an action that can be triggered when the file is classified by a content understanding model. So rather than having to build a delay and waiting for hoping that the file gets classified before the rest of your flow runs, you can actually use this new action to say, hey, only when the classification of the file is complete and that date gets populated, now go run the rest of the flow. And in this case, like I said, based on the fee amount of it being the contract being greater than $50,000, we're going to provide a condition that says, hey, either post a message, an email notification to the manager or a message to the Teams channel. I want to point out one other integration, and that's with this service contract library. You'll see that I actually have a different column attached to this contract. You can make changes to your document understanding models by adding to the schema, training additional extractors, and then applying them to the library. And in this case, I've built this contract services type, and this is mapped to a managed metadata field. And you'll see that the value for this Diego Siciliani service agreement is contract service type creative. Now, creative is actually a controlled value or term in my managed term set. And if we switch over to that view, you'll see that here is the term creative. That's the preferred label. And you'll also notice that I have a bunch of synonyms: design, graphics, typography. If we go ahead and tab over to the Diego Siciliani document, you'll see that the value that's actually in the document is design. So what we've done here is when you map an AI document understanding extractor to a managed metadata field, even if what gets predicted or extracted by the model is a synonym, what we can do is we can take that synonym, look and see what the preferred label is, and go ahead and write that preferred label into the field. Okay, so now that you've seen all the different ways that a model can be applied to a library and all the things that it can do to really help in the classification and extraction of information from those files to really aid in retrieval and business processes and even governance, let's go take a little bit deeper look at what's happening behind the scenes to build these models. So content understanding. A key driver behind these investments is really around providing businesses, you, with the means to harness the knowledge of your people and the content that gets created. And to do that, we really need to provide you with the tools to aid in those endeavors, to provide knowledge, insights, and the means to accelerate your daily productivity. We are proud of the platform we provide to create, manage, share, and govern your digital assets, but acknowledge that there remain challenges and areas of opportunity to improve. In our approach, we really focus on how to help you as content comes into Microsoft 365, into SharePoint libraries, and how we can aid in the processing and understanding of these contents to really drive consistency, resiliency, and optimizations. In a recent assessment report we commissioned, it's clear that there is a savings by just improving the speed and accuracy of metadata and governance on managed content. So like I said, when we think about this, we think of it as really evolving the service, intelligent content services. And we kind of look at this as sort of three overlapping pillars, if you will. There's content understanding. It's the creation of these no-code AI models that can really help the system to understand how to classify or understand what type of document it is that's being uploaded, and then to extract the right information from it, and then really just automatically apply that metadata. We all know how difficult it is to get people to consistently and manually apply metadata. And so the more that we can do to help you in that endeavor, we think that that's a valuable investment. And then obviously the processing. Really, a lot of this is as the stuff comes into the system, as your content comes into the system, how can we really integrate with the rest of the Power Platform to help you streamline those content-centric processes? And then, of course, as you saw with the retention label, and soon we'll have sensitivity label support as well, to really help you control and manage the content to improve security and the proper implementation of governance policies using Microsoft Information Protection. But I also don't want you to forget, because we haven't, that metadata rules and all the investments that we have already made in metadata, especially around the managed metadata service with taxonomy and content types, are not only there, but really reinforced. As many of you know, the value of Project Cortex is that it accelerates the transfer of this content and the classification of this information. And to do that, we have really invested in the managed metadata service this past year. Many of those capabilities that we have modernized have already started to roll out to you, but there are additional improvements through the Project Cortex product that we'll be providing. And a lot of that really has to do with just improving how information comes into the system, how we can help you with improved analytics on that data, and then also helping you obviously with these models that can be applied to libraries to aid in classification and information extraction. So you saw how the models being applied to a library can start to aid in that automation, to aid in that governance, to aid in that business process automation. So let's take a little bit deeper look at what these models are. When we think of these new AI services and capabilities, it really is around making it easier to build this content understanding framework into your system using your content. We're all familiar with the ability to just manually construct and apply content types and apply metadata, but we also know how difficult it is to get people to do it and to do it consistently. There is also more work and investment happening in pre-built models. We're working with to incorporate object detection so that we can identify objects in images and then save those out as tags that you can elect to use or edit with no training required. But as soon as you need a little bit more training, something more specific to your business process, we want to give you the tools to do that. And there are two types of models that we're going to continue looking at for the rest of this session. And that's the document understanding models I demoed a few minutes ago, and also form processing. These are very similar in the way that they're constructed, where you're taking sample documents, a small set of unlabeled files, and then training those files to build your model to help it understand that type of content and information you want to extract from it. The difference between these two is where they're being built, how they're managed, and what types of or formats of content they work best on. As you saw in that service agreement with Diego Siciliani, that was a very unstructured document, lots of text, essentially a Word document. And that type of file excels really well with a document understanding model. But if you have something more structured, then you're going to need a form processing model, which is built in AI Builder, a new service in the Power Platform. I want to quickly touch on, before we look at where these models are being built, that you first have to configure the service to light up these features. And that's done in both the admin center for configuring the service, as well as creating additional content centers. So you're going to turn on automate content understanding capabilities. And then within the SharePoint admin center, you can also build additional content centers. By default, when you configure the service, you're going to create one. That content center is where these document understanding models are built and managed and even deployed. But the other piece that you're also provisioning is, where does the form processing option light up on libraries? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The Content Center is a new site template that we provide. Again, it is not available through self-service site creation. It is actually managed by the administrator. But this Content Center site template is unique in that it creates some special libraries for the creation and management of these document understanding models. One of the things that it does is it provides a new training interface. This document understanding model interface is a way for you to collect the example files you need for your training set, to, at minimum, train the classifier, optionally train additional extractors if you want to select or extract specific entity information from the document and train on those. And then eventually, once the model is done and ready to go, apply it to one or more libraries in your tenant. This training experience is very cool and also very easy. One of the things that's really powerful about this approach is we're using some new machine learning techniques, very innovative, that allow us to provide you with the ability to create a model with a very small set of unlabeled example documents. And then once the model understands how to understand what type of document it is or what information you want extracted from it, you're ready to go. And so the experience here is around labeling those elements to help the model, and then explaining or providing cues in the document, especially in the case of an extractor where you're trying to select specific information out of the document, how to find that element or string in the document. Finally, in the same model interface, as you saw, we provide the ability to set a retention label. This will be available on release in October. The sensitivity label support will come a little bit later this year. This really works off of pre-created labels that are created in your Security and Compliance Center. So the power here is that instead of waiting for the scan to find those files based on the rules and apply the appropriate information protection label, you can designate, hey, I know that when these contracts or values require a label, I can specify it. And so when that file gets processed by a model and correctly classified, part of that classification can be setting the retention label. And then finally, with document understanding models, you have the ability to apply these to one or more document libraries. And in the case of the example I showed you earlier, that library had multiple document understanding models applied. So you can imagine that maybe you want a business operations library and you want it to distinguish between contracts, statements of work, and requests for proposal. You can build all of those models, apply them to the same library, and then the system, when files are created or uploaded to that library, will do the proper classification. And then if there's any additional information that needs to be extracted based on that classifier, it can go ahead and run those steps as well. And then finally, you'll see on the right there that the Content Center is also the location where you can manage these models, but also see how they're performing. So we provide some basic analytics currently, which will evolve over time, telling you what the models are that have been published and where, and how many files they have processed over time. Okay, before we jump into the form processing model type, let's take a look at the document understanding creation process. I wanted you guys to see just how easy this is. All right, so here we are in a Content Center. Like I said, the Content Center is the new site template created by your administrator to create, train, deploy, and even manage document understanding models. Quick tour of the homepage here. We actually have a tour. So for users who are first getting onboarded into this new experience, we provide several in-product experiences to help users learn more about what the model experience is. And these are great references. So for example, in this tour, what we're going to do is we're going to just quickly run you through each of the steps of building and deploying a model. And that is always available to your users who have access to the Content Center. The Content Center is also where we'll provide those analytics on the homepage, like I've mentioned, for all the models that are being published, as well as the number of files that have been processed over time. And this is like sort of a rolling view. So it gives you some sense of how your models are doing. Now, when you look at a model, we actually, before we jump into looking at a model, I want to show you one other one too. There's also this benefits change notice model. And this is one that is a sample model that you have the option of importing. And what it's going to do is it's going to come with a bunch of sample files and a bunch of built explanations and extractors so that you can learn more about the experience. But I want to show you what that experience is for creating these things. So the way you do that is from the new menu, you can go ahead and build a new document understanding model. And so in this case, I want to build one for insurance notices. So this is a type of document that is important for me to A, have classified, and B, maybe even have some information extracted from it. So when I create this insurance notice, what we do is we create the underlying content type, create the model, and then we redirect you to the model homepage. And you'll notice that most of the steps are grayed out right now because we require you to first bring in some files and do some training before you can actually apply the model. So we're going to go ahead and add some files. And when you add files, you're actually adding them from a training file library that's included as a part of this template. Now, if you don't have those files there yet, you can go ahead and upload them. I've gone ahead and already uploaded several of these insurance notices. Now, I want to point out too that there's two documents here with an N prefix. This is an important part of training the classifier for a document understanding model, is you need some negative examples. You'll see that up here. You need at least one file that is not an example. Think about that. That's what helps the model to understand how to distinguish an insurance notice from something that isn't an insurance notice. Give it an example of something that isn't an insurance notice. So we're going to go ahead and bring in all of these files. Notice that I'm bringing in 12. You need really at least about 6 to 8. But if you're depending on the complexity of the model you're building, you might need more. And you always have the option to bring in more files if you find that your model isn't quite fit or performing to your expectations. Now, once I have the files in here, the first thing I need to do, the very minimum I need to do, is I need to train the classifier. I again want to stress that training the extractors, those are the sort of the models that are going to pull specific information out of the files. Those are optional. At the very least, you need to train the model to understand, in this case, what is an insurance notice. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that train classifier button and go to the training experience. And the training experiences, depending on whether you're building a classifier or an extractor, are pretty similar in that you first need to label a minimum set of documents and then train them and then optionally test against unlabeled documents that are similar or not, just to make sure that your model is working as expected. So notice that this part is really pretty easy. Notice I've brought in my documents. It's brought into focus the very first one in my list. And all I have to do is answer a very simple question. Is this file an example of an insurance notice? I'm going to say yes. And notice that what it does is it labels this as a positive. I'm going to go ahead and label a couple of more. Notice that I have to label at least 5 examples and 1 negative example. So I'm going to go ahead and label 4 of these guys as examples of insurance notices because they are. Actually, I'll go ahead and label the 5th one as well, just so you can see it's not allowing me to go to train yet because I haven't yet labeled 1 negative example. I need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, here's a negative file that is not an insurance notice. I'm going to go ahead and flag that as no. Now that I've labeled a sufficient number of documents, you'll see that I get this banner saying, hey, you're ready to move on to train. On the training page, you'll see that you have to provide an explanation. This is some type of cue in the document that helps the model understand how to distinguish this set of files from others. So in this case, the insurance notice from other files. So these explanations, there's different types of explanations. In this case, I'm going to do something that is more of like just a string, so that frequently occurs in these insurance notices. So this disclosure block. You'll see that there are different types here. There's a phrase list, which is words and phrases and things like strings, or I could even use patterns. This type of explanation is great for things like phone numbers and dates and things where there is a consistent pattern of characters. But in this case, because I know that there's this disclosure block that occurs regularly, in the document. I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this string, select a phrase list, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in and build a disclosure explanation, telling the model, hey, look for this type of string to distinguish this type of file as an insurance notice. When I save it, we're going to go ahead and evaluate it. So now what's happening is the model is actually training on this document based on what I've labeled as insurance notices and that explanation. Again, an explanation is required in order to do training. And if you need more than one explanation, you can do that. Like I said, you might be, depending on what you're trying to do, you might need a pattern explanation and a phrase explanation to either identify, in the case of an extractor, the entity you're trying to pull out by using some context like where it appears. I'll show you that in a second. In this particular case, you'll see that I matched, meaning that it is correctly understanding what an insurance document is, because based on my label, this is the evaluation where the model has processed. And if there was a mismatch, I would have to go back and look at those and see where there might be some changes. I want to use this time to plug. There's another session where myself and my colleague, engineering manager Ming-Xuan Zhu, are going to go through this in a lot more detail, and we'll show you more examples of how to build complex models as well as how to troubleshoot them. So now you see that because I have a match, the model is saying, hey, we're good to go. So I have two options. I can either go ahead and exit training or test. All testing is doing is allowing me to either pull in, or in this case, any files that I pulled in my original training set that I did not label. The model will quickly run against those and confirm how these files are being processed by the model. This is just another place to sort of test fitness and readiness of your model. When I'm done, I can exit training and go back to the model homepage. And now that I'm here, you'll see that I can now apply the model to a library because I'm effectively done. I don't have to train any other extractors, but I want to very quickly just show you what the extractor experience is so you can understand how it's very similar to training a classifier. This is the information that I want to extract and write out to a particular field as a part of that content type schema. So in this case, I can go ahead and build a new extractor. And let's just go ahead and do something like service date. And I'll show you what that is in a second. When I get into the document, same experience, I'm back at a label interface, and you'll see that it brings the first document into view. And you'll notice that there's this service start date of Monday, October 14th, 2019. I want to actually extract that information because maybe I want to use some downstream business process that says, hey, any insurance notice that comes in after October requires renewal or a follow-up or some additional audit or investigation by the team. So it's important for me to extract this information. So in this experience, instead of saying yes or no, I'm actually going to really label the document. And notice that what I do is I highlight it and that label. And if I make a mistake, I can go ahead and X that out. But if I'm okay with it, I can either save it, and you'll see that that label gets written in associated with that document. I can then jump to the next document, and I can see another date. I want to go ahead and label that. And instead of saving, I can also just hit next file, and we'll auto save it for you. Now, same experience here. I'm looking more for examples of the label, the document that contain the label I want to extract. So it's less about needing that negative example here, but I can go ahead and label at least 5 documents. I want to label these real quick here. And I can even go to one of those negative documents and say that there's no label in this document. And even that can be used as a training cue. And then once I save that, it'll note that. But I still need to label my 5 minimum. So let me go back and label this 5th one. And now we're good to go, and I can move on to training. Now, similarly, I have to provide an explanation for this as well. And I can do something like a phrase, like I could say that, oh, look, you can find this entity by always looking for this string that always appears before it. But another type of explanation, as I mentioned, is those patterns, where I can just do something like a pattern list. Now I'm going to jump back out of this because I want to show you something else that's very cool. I can build that from a blank, but we also provide this pre-built explanation library. And when I open this up, you'll see that there are a number of pre-builts. And what's valuable about this is we take care of doing all the heavy lifting for you. In the case of a pattern, a date might appear many different ways in a document. And so what we've done is we've enumerated all those different patterns for you. So you can go ahead and just select this date pre-built explanation and go ahead and add it. And I want to just go ahead and modify the name since I want this to be the service date. And I'm good with all the different explanations. Let's go ahead and save this. And similar to the training of the classifier, now it's going to go ahead and run. And you will see here that what I labeled it as in blue, the machine is predicting in green, and you'll see that there's a match. And if I go and select a different document, you'll see the same. And a lot of that is because of the comprehensiveness of this pre-built pattern explanation is helping the model very quickly understand and disambiguate the date in this insurance notice file. So now that I'm good to go, I'm going to go ahead and just exit the training here. And you'll see here that my model is now effectively ready to go. If this is all I need, I can now help it. The model is ready to identify things as insurance notices, and if it finds them, extract the service date. So if I want to go ahead and apply this model to a library, I can go ahead and apply this model. I'm going to go ahead and just pick a library here in the content center, but you can apply it to other libraries in your tenant as long as you have access to those files. To those libraries. I want to go ahead and pick this target library, just so I want you to see what happens here. Once it's done, we have now effectively applied this model to that library. And you'll see here that the model has been is updated to note which libraries it has been set for. I'm going to go ahead and go to that library because I want you to see what happens when you apply a model to it. You'll see a couple of things. Remember when I showed you that demo at the beginning where I had multiple models applied to the library? You'll see the same thing here. You'll notice that I've added the content type, and I've defaulted to that content type view because I want you to see that, hey, there's that service date, and here's some additional meta information that you can choose to hide in that view. But the important thing is you'll see that now that that view has been added, that content type has been added, and yes, that model is now a part of this library. So, very exciting stuff with these document understanding models, right? But we're not done. There is another type of model that we provide in this release of Project Cortex, and that is for form processing models. Now, some of you who are familiar with the new AI Builder service, which is part of the Power Platform, this is that same service. We are using the AI Builder form processing model experience to build form processing models, but we've worked very closely with the team to make a nice integrated experience in SharePoint. And as a reminder, what these form processing models do is they work really well on more structured documents, things where you have very clear field and value, name value pairs in a document. So in this case, I have a digital purchase order invoice that has a bunch of information around who the vendor is, who it's being shipped to, the details of the invoice, and everything is in a very structured or tabular format. And this type of document, this format of document, is very appropriate for the form processing model. Now, the model creation flow is a little bit different. These models, like I said, are not built in the content center, but rather they are built in the AI Builder experience. And so you get to that experience by going to the library where you want to where you want to apply this model to, and you launch the AI Builder experience from there. And then what we do is we help you by taking you through the training experience, but then we provide some additional mechanic and capability at the end of that experience when you're ready to publish your form processing model and apply it. What we do is we will go ahead and create the Power Automate flow for you that references that model you just trained and built and apply it back to the library and send you back to the library. So now you're ready to go. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I think that walking through the experience will speak much more clearly than this diagram here. I want to start in the document library where I want to apply the model. What I want to capture is information from these purchase orders for, let's say, a workshop, parts that are being ordered. Notice that the information is fairly structured. This is essential when building a form processing model. To get started, underneath the Automate tab, I want to see a new option for AI Builder and create a model to process forms. I'm going to go ahead and create this model, give it a name. Let's call it Parts Invoices. Now, similar to the document understanding models, we are associating this model with a content type. In fact, I'll be creating a new content type in this case. And also, I'll be creating a library view and setting it as the default. I'll also be continuing the model training experience in AI Builder. It's going to go ahead and create the model. And then again, similar to the document understanding experience, I require some training files that it will analyze and to get me started with building the model. These files can be images or PDF files. I'm going to go ahead and add some of those local files that I just showed you that are PDFs. I want to go ahead and just grab the first 5. Once they're uploaded, the first step is to analyze. Once the analysis is complete, I can go ahead and select which form fields I want to use. You'll notice that the model, through the analysis, will detect several fields, but I also have the option to actually identify the fields it did not detect and then train against those. Or if it made some mistakes, I can go ahead and even resize those fields. I will note that when you do this, you will have to go and the adjustment you make on one of the sample files, you'll have to make on the other 4 before you can complete your training. For purposes of this illustration, we'll maybe do one of those, but let's go ahead and just select a few so you can see how the process works. You'll see that it's highlighted several of the fields that it has identified. I want to go ahead and grab a few of these fields. Let's go ahead and grab, just for illustration, the phone. And you'll notice the date and the PO got merged into one. So I have the option to go ahead and resizing this. Let's say I wanted to just grab the date. And I want to go ahead and grab one other field. Let's go ahead and grab the total. And you'll notice that it's all in caps. I even have the option to go ahead and relabel it here. Once I have those 3 fields, I'm going to go ahead and confirm them. Because I had to modify the date field, the model might require some additional help in recognizing that in the other 4 sample files. The way it does this is you'll see that the phone number and the total are already detected in the second file, but it needs some help knowing where the date field is. So I want to go ahead and draw on the document. So I can select that and go ahead and just highlight it. And then once I'm done, I can move on to the third file because again, I'll have to do that for the date field in the remaining training files. I can also go ahead and select it and say it's the date. Move on to the next one. And when I'm done, select done. And now that I've selected those 3 fields, I can begin training. Now, most of what I'm showing you right now is really just what happens, obviously, inside the AI Builder interface. Where Project Cortex comes in is in helping you not only build this model through AI Builder, but also to take this constructed model once it's trained and actually associate it with a Power Automate flow, and then take that flow and the model reference and save it back to the library where you initiated the process. And in doing so, you now have a functioning model attached to the library, similar to what we do with a document understanding model that's created in the Content Center, except now it is going to be applied to that library and be triggered by the Power Automate flow to run against any created or uploaded files. I can stay here on this dialog while it finishes its training. If I go to the model library, it's just going to show a list of my other models and show the progress of that training. If you do go there, what you can do is just wait until the model is done training and then click on the model name to get to the details page. On the details page, I can see all my information is there, the 3 fields I've trained. I'm going to go ahead, I could do a quick test that just allows you to sort of do a test against the model in its current state, similar to what we do in the document understanding model experience. But I want to go ahead and just publish it. And what this does is it packages up the model so it's ready for use. Once the model is ready for use, this is something that's a little bit different. Because we came in from a SharePoint library, I could reuse this model in a Power App or in another custom flow. But in this case, what we're going to do is, again, create this new Power Automate flow and attach it back to the library that you started from. We're going to go ahead and create that flow. And we're doing this from a template, so we're pre-populating the flow with the model reference, the library information, essentially doing all the work for you, so it's all ready to go. And once the flow has been successfully created, you'll see that there's now a link to go back to SharePoint. And this takes me back to the library where I started. And notice that the fields that I trained, the phone, the total, and the date, have now been added to the library, as well as the content type and its associated view has been set as the default. We're ready to go. I can go ahead and upload some files to test it out. I'll grab a couple that the model hasn't seen. And there you have it, automation in action. All right, so in summary, we provide 2 types of model building experiences that are really designed for different types of content you want to classify and extract information from. They're really optimized, as you can tell, from different file formats and layouts. I have a summary of just some of the differences here that I want to point out. Document understanding models are created in the Content Center and can be applied to multiple libraries, whereas the forms understanding ones are currently only created for the library where they're intended to be used. Multiple models can be applied to a single document library. You saw the demo I did at the beginning of this session where I had a library with 2 document understanding models. You might even have a form processing model there as well. And finally, models use content types. This is super important. Again, we have really reinvested in the managed metadata service and will continue to do so. And this is one area where we wanted to give you the ability to make these models that are associated with a construct that you've been using in the past and are familiar with. And these constructs and their schemas can be used, as you all know, for content retrieval, compliance file plans, and even as triggers for business process flows built using Power Automate. And finally, we have provided managed metadata support when you're building document understanding extractors. Some of those, that support for form processing models, as well as support for other column data types, will be coming in the near future. So speaking of managed metadata, I wanted to briefly come back to this because, again, we have been making some investments here, as many of you are aware of. There's also some great sessions available that cover some of those investments, as well as where we're going with these, both in the managed metadata service and investments for the administrators, as well as for end users. And I wanted to show you very quickly how some of this plays into the Project Cortex Intelligent Content Services platform. So much about our investment around the metadata experience has really been around reinforcing and evolving the foundation, really around the discovery of content types, the discovery of managed terms that your business or organization has created, as well as helping to enable the tagging of content so that it can aid, again, with that improving search, driving business process, and even ensuring enforcement of your compliance policies. And this is work that we have started on, and we will continue to evolve both in the service itself, as well as how Project Cortex can take advantage of it. So here are some of a summary of the new capabilities that we provide in the managed metadata service with Project Cortex. As I mentioned earlier, when building document understanding models, you can use a managed metadata field when training an extractor to match machine extracted values to terms in your map term set. So again, you will have to create that term set beforehand, create the column that references that term set, and then you can reference that site column when you're building your extractor. And as you noted in my example, we do synonym lookup. So if the machine extracts a synonym, we'll map it to the preferred label and write that preferred label into the library column. Finally, term store reports. We wanted to give you a better understanding of just what the composition is of the term sets that you're creating and how and where they are being used. We're just at the beginning of this, but we plan to evolve this experience, provide you even more analytics and insights going forward. Finally, content type push. This is an experience that really is related to as we evolve our content type syndication story. We want to provide a means to target select custom content types to hubs and their associated sites. So additionally, what this does is it allows you to take an enterprise content type and push it to a select hub or select hubs, and also to any associated sites to that hub. But we go a little bit further. In addition to really ensuring that that content type gets to all of those sites, we'll enforce it. So when new lists or libraries are created, that content type will be automatically applied. This is super important because it's one thing to create the content types, but if nobody knows that they're there, or nobody knows that they need to make some changes to their library to properly configure it, this, along with things like site designs, will help ensure that that consistent configuration is happening across your tenant. And then finally, there's a new import format. We know that the import mechanism for the current managed metadata service was pretty thin and pretty limited. And as more services have evolved different types of format support, that interoperability becomes so important. And it's really key to leveraging and extending the taxonomy service, especially because you may not be building your term set completely from scratch. You may be starting with something that's domain specific or something related to your industry and really needing that third-party support to start with, and then construct it or customize it for your business needs. And so we've started by supporting SCOS, which is a common format that many third-party managed term sets and taxonomies are made available in. And we're going to be evolving that in the future, just really extending that import capability and eventually even the export capability so that you can really confidently take advantage of the investments you're making in your term store service and even evolving the term sets that you make available for your business users. Okay, we're at the end of this session, but boy, there's more to come. I just wanted to quickly touch upon the fact that while we are announcing and making this new product available to you in October, there is many more things we have planned and many more things coming in the near future. So here's just a quick snapshot of the roadmap. A lot of the work that I've talked about in this session will be available soon in October, and there will also be knowledge experiences coming very soon as well. Early next year, we're continuing to evolve a lot of the things I've shown you today by expanding the model types, really just continuing to improve the capabilities of the content center and the things that you can do there to manage your models, and really starting to emphasize and grow that relationship and how we can best leverage the investments that you've made in the managed metadata service by really strengthening the connections there. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that me and the team will be looking forward to sharing with you in the near future, some things that we're thinking about, really about how we can continue to evolve this intelligent content services platform. I want to wrap by just letting you know that there are a number of other wonderful sessions, including one that I actually will be doing with my colleague Ming Xuan, that goes into a much more detail about the document understanding model building experience. It's sort of a breakdown of what I showed you very briefly in today's session in a lot more detail. And so you should be sure to check that out. I also mentioned that there's a number of additional sessions on metadata and taxonomy, as well as a wonderful session on just really how to get started with Project Cortex, how to activate it, and how to make sure that it gets properly adopted and used in your organization. We're very excited that we're at this point where we can finally say, hey, this is almost ready for you to start using. So thank you again for your time today, and I hope you found this information useful and look forward to hearing how you use Project Cortex. Thank you very much.